Only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile. Very few professions fulfill this observation by Albert Einstein. One such is a doctor's lifestyle. Dr. Franz Owano knows this pretty well.
My name is Franz Owano, a medical doctor by profession. Medicine is, it's not just a course, I think it's a calling. And it's not something you do just for the title. And if you're doing it purely for the title, I don't think you'll graduate, because it takes a lot out of you. It takes heart, it takes your body, it takes your soul, and we go through so much. So it's something you have to love doing. We all do our part in service of society, and I thought this would be the best way I could contribute. A career feeds your body and helps you finance things you think you need. Some are even deluded, but a calling, it fills your soul. It gives you purpose, gives you a reason to wake up every day. There are so many people with careers that are quite well-paying, but they dread every day they wake up. They dread when the morning, when the alarm clock rings. They hate their bosses, they hate their colleagues, they hate what they do, but they earn well. Typically, I wake up at around 4:30 a.m. After 4:30 a.m., I put on my running suit, my jogging suit, and I jog. I take a jog, usually around a 30-minute jog. And then after the cardio, I finish with a warm down. So after my workout, I take a shower and I do some light reading for another hour. So that's going to be around by 7:30. Then I have breakfast around 8. Then 8:30 I head to work.
It is after his internship that Franz will discover what his calling had in store for him.
I did my internship in a place called Nyahururu County Hospital. Yeah, it was a great experience for me, because I got to get out of the city and experience life from another setting. So on finishing my internship, I initially thought that I wanted to do to continue my service as a medical officer or in Embu or Machakos. But life has a funny way of presenting itself. Yeah, there's a quote: "Life is what happens when you're busy making plans." Yeah. So by those times, the county government had started posting doctors. So I went to the county office in Nanyuki, and I thought I'd be posted in Laikipia, because I couldn't get the posting I wanted. So I wanted to go to a place called Romoruti. I went there, I kept being told that your papers have not been finalized. And then all of a sudden they said, "We're not employed." So I was lost for words. So what are the next options? So they told me there's one place that might be open, but I'm not sure you're willing to go. So I asked, "Where is this place?" It's a place called Olmora. I asked myself, Olmora. So the first time I went there, we got stuck 3 times with the cab I went with. And I even saw a cow getting stuck on the way to work. And we actually had to leave the car to help the owner of the cow pull the car out. So when I got to the place, it was a simple, decent hospital, but they were trying to upgrade it to a level 4. But for that, they needed a doctor to become the medical superintendent. So things were really bad then, but it was sporadic when I was there. It would go up and down in waves. But as per now, things have gotten really, really bad. But I hope it won't influence medical staff not to work there, because someone has to work there. So I reached a point where I realized that I have to start adjusting, because you're dressed so nicely, but then you enter that environment and you get so disoriented. So I had to travel with gumboots most times. So in Nyahururu, I put my gumboots on, we enter the car. In case you get stuck, tutapambana nayo. Yeah. So by the time you get to the hospital, you've gotten stuck 4 times. You're tired, you're muddy, and then you have a whole day. Now from there also is accommodation. There is no accommodation, Because by the time I went there, all the rooms were taken by my subordinates, right? Because I was in charge by that time. So I had to look for accommodation in the town. Everything in life is adaptation, and like you say, your point of view. So if you have a positive point of view and you can adapt to an environment, I think you can survive almost anywhere. But like I said, if the perception of a place is no one can work here, yeah, I did not want to, you'll reinforce it, and it's not something I wanted to reinforce. So after me, other doctors were posted.
Wow.
And I'd like to say it's down to my efforts, hopefully.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't sound grandiose, but I hope going there encouraged others to go there also. And if you can identify someone who has done something and not a myth, for example, if you had someone went there, but you've never seen them, you've never met them, you've never heard about them, but you can put a face to the name and identify someone, yeah, this fellow went there, it's possible.
Mental health is one of the most common and challenging illness that is rampant in our society and unfortunately often misunderstood.
Mental health generally is a field where we explore a patient's state of mind, and the exploration is aimed at creating balance. Now, within this African society of ours, I believe we sort of sweep such issues under the rug, and we've been shunning mental health for a long time, and we've always been assuming wrongly that these are things that only affect people in the West, right? So we deal with issues by avoidance and distractions rather than facing things head on. So that if there are different sorts of people, there are two main types. There are people who are implosive and explosive. Yeah? Explosive people are people who vent out. Whenever they have issues, yeah, they vent them out and they release them. But I think as an African society, we are more implosive. We keep things inside, we bury them, and they build, and they build, and they build, till one day it explodes. So I think talking about these things is one issue. Accepting that therapy actually has value, especially among men in our society. Men in our society don't like talking. Yes. But it's not fully our fault also, because we've been conditioned to pursue this persona of a total man. Strong, resilient, and keeps everything to himself. But in the process, you keep dying inside. And also, I think we need to reduce the stigma around mental health, because there are different sorts of mental issues. Yeah, it's not only psychosis. That's just one in a multifaceted field. It could be depression. You could have bipolar. You could be an addict suffering with substance abuse. So if we reduce the stigma, people will feel more free to open up. And when they feel more free to open up, we can address issues. One is genetics. Like some of these mental issues, it's like a time bomb just waiting to happen. You don't really have a say, right? Other things can be social factors. Like for example, in this COVID period, yeah, loss of income, yeah, social breakdowns. But especially in Nairobi, I think the economics and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic have really contributed to this. Two, it can be a social thing. For example, a separation. For example, if you're very close with a certain family member or friend and they suddenly go abroad and you find it difficult to cope. Another thing, it could be bereavement. If a person that you're very close to passes on and you're unable to cope, you may descend into it. It can be marital strife. For example, if, for example, you lost your job and there are certain demands that your spouse has, and you start feeling like you're being maligned or neglected, it could lead to depression. Certain core symptoms that you can tell if someone is bipolar. One, distractibility. Yeah? It's difficult for them to keep focus on a given subject. You give them a task, they get easily distracted. Two is increased interest in pleasurable activities. For example, if someone likes traveling, they can do it excessively. If someone likes playing the guitar, they'll do it excessively and shun things they should do. For example, instead of going to work, they may wake up and say, I'm going to Malindi. Yeah? Another thing is impulsivity. They do not think through decisions and consequences, especially when they're in a manic phase, right? And so there's a lot of very poor decision making. They can wake up and spend their life savings in 2 weeks if they're in a manic phase. Or they can, if irritated, they'll handle the stress in a violent way that would not be normal. So they're very impulsive. However, we've learned that with medication, the mood stabilizers, you can be able to manage it and live a relatively healthy life. And there are several bipolar patients who are well medicated and are quite stable and are very high functioning.
The doctor advises us some of the commonly abused substances and how or when to detect danger.
By the time you become an addict, now you have an issue of mental health now, because you cannot function without the drug. It's affecting you occupationally and it's affecting you socially. And also another thing is, for example, for the case of narcotics, the dependency and the addiction, it totally makes you, how would I say, a zombie, that you cannot function without it. Another thing is the use of drugs like cannabis that are used very casually among the youth these days. It can contribute to psychosis. And in so many cases, we've seen individuals who began developing these symptoms and they don't have the genetic component to develop things like schizophrenia. However, the psychotic symptoms can be linked directly to the drug abuse. So what happens with these drugs? They affect the neural wiring in your brain, right? And you become so dependent that you cannot function without it because your brain chemistry has been altered. The difference between recreational use of a drug and dependence of a drug. Recreational use of a drug is something that you take after a long day at work or usually, for example, at the end of the weekend, right? But abuse is if you do not take a sip of whiskey in the morning, you will not get out of bed. You will not even be able to go back to work. You will be shaking and having tremors. Now that is dependence. If you cannot take 3 cigarettes in the morning, to be comfortable at work, or you'll be cranky, in a bad mood, creating so much friction, you're on the road to dependence. But if you can wait until Friday and stay the entire week without drinking or having a cigarette, that means it's in moderation, it's recreational. But if you have to take it every day to function, it's a clear sign you're dependent.
There is a genuine reality that we don't see except by use of art, our true expressions. How else would Franz express his real-life experiences that inspires him daily? Perhaps we could have a chance to peep through his life.
I think I wrote my first book. I wrote it when I was 20. Yes, I wrote it as a way of venting. I wrote 1 chapter just to see, in a very bad mood. And then the next day when I was a bit calmer, I reapproached it with a sober mind and I realized there's something to this. So I wrote another chapter and another chapter. So within a few months, there was an entire book. So I realized I can actually do it. So from then on, I made it a mission that every time I have a school holiday, and by that time we didn't have the long breaks because I was in the 5-year program for medicine. These days they do 6 years and they have long breaks of 3 months. We didn't have that luxury. We had only 1 month for the entire year. You can imagine. So in every year I decided I'm going to write 1 book every year when I have my break during that 35 day period. So in second year I wrote my first book. It was called A Silent Epiphany. A Silent Epiphany. In the second year, when I was in third year, during that break, I wrote my second book. It was called Banda's War. In my fourth year, I wrote another book called Chasing After Unicorns. That delves into mental health. Again, I've written so many books until I'm losing track of them. First book was about self-identity, because in my experiences in campus, I felt like the young men around me were having this very bleak view of life, right? And they were connecting self-worth with net worth, right? If I don't have money, I have no value, right? And I think to an extent it was also contributed by the sponsor culture among university students. So every Friday, while we go to humble establishments, I don't say kibanda, humble establishments, to gain nourishment, you see such flashy cars coming to pick your classmates or ladies of your age, of your age group, and it was a very normal thing every Friday, Saturday. 4-wheel drives, Mercedes, BMWs. It was a very normal thing. So I had some friends who were very irate. They're very annoyed by this, because they felt like these ladies were demeaning them because they didn't have money. And there's this culture of revenge. When you get money, you're going to revenge. They used to like using that word a lot. I'm not sure what it meant. So Panda's War was a book that came out of a discussion between my mother and my younger brother. It was a kitchen discussion actually, while my mother we were helping her make supper. And this book revolves around redemption. This story was about a demon on a path to redemption, out of an interaction with a human girl. Yes. There are favorite books, and there's the books that take the most out of you. As you write, or as you get better at anything, it starts with a naive innocence, but then you start getting more. It starts becoming more clinical, right? The way you write, the way you phrase things, you start getting better and better at it, right? So out of all the books I wrote, I think the books that are closest to my heart, of course the first one, because it was the Genesis. It was called A Silent Epiphany. And then which I dedicated to my mother and my sisters. The second one was Banda as well, which is very special to me, which I dedicated to my brothers. The Trials of Chekundor is a book I wrote while I was in Walmora, actually. It was inspired by my experiences there. I decided, why not exhibit the art in a virtual environment where you can access from anywhere in the world. So if you're in Hong Kong, click on the link. Exhibit, you go through it in a virtual environment and choose what you want and contact me.
My eyes don't see before my life come be. Say many try to fool me, but I dey pray for my enemies and truly. And I dey pray for my kids, that's my blessing. Pray for the friends I lost. I pray you never see no loss. Yeah, cause one pressure fit turn to pressure. I don't see where pressure make man record. Yeah, so make you live your life with judge and no regret. When man pressure, I got it, man don't get control. My brother.
As Dr. Franz keeps flipping his mental and printed pages forward, he passionately wants you to know,
I think you can do whatever you set your mind to. You just have to believe. Believing is half the task. And you can be more than you think you are. I'd like to thank my parents, my father for introducing me to books very early in life, my mother for giving me encouragement all through, my brothers and sisters for supporting me, and also to my friends for showing up whenever I needed them and giving me the strength to not give up.